Once Joel has set into a deep coma as the injury that he sustained has been too severe, and it's pretty much Clementine to practically save him. But even this one, it goes much more differently because even though Ellie did manage to get Joel back to his feet, but it did took some time to us to a different season. But this is Clementine, and I feel like Clementine is the type of character that could pretty much take care of herself in a very young age in season 2 in a different choice, as we've seen that Clementine in a very young age where he pretty much survived, and not only that, she took care of AJ, who is barely a month old, and she managed to survive through it all to the point where she even got AJ through the toughest time. So I could definitely see Clementine managing to take care of Joel, and perhaps even better because Clementine would be more used to the survivor life compared to Ellie. Yeah, she even does better at hunting and sometimes doing some questionable action like stealing people's supplies where Clementine could avoid something entirely by trying to search supplies on her own, which would be taken much more longer. And because of that, Clementine would but still would have a difficult time getting Joe back to his feet as Clementine would still meet the same people where Clementine has met after very much taking down a deal where in exchange to get medicine. While I feel like Clementine would perhaps get her point, but she could acknowledge a trade of some sort. And even though it went perhaps the same, but unlike Ali, Clementine is not willing to easily trust people, and because of that, Clementine wouldn't be caught off surprise when the guy pretty much tricked her and getting to hunt down not just Joel, but just like in the original as Clementine managed to get the medicine to Joel, but luckily Clementine is being chased by less men because thanks to her being much more careful and a survivor, which allows her to get through the many people, but ultimately Mister gets captured and has to experience what Ellie had to do to get out of there. But thankfully, Joel would have waken up much more sooner than later, thanks to Clementine taking care of Joel much more better, as Joel felt slightly better in the timeline, but still quite hurt, as Joel managed to save Clementine the moment where Clementine really killed a person when this guy pretty much tries to do something that he should have done, as Clementine just killed a man. But luckily, Joel was there to pretty much save her, as the both survivors tries to get out of there before the infected come attracted by the fire. Once Lee, Ellie, and most of the group has finally reached to their destination, hopefully their plan is to find a boat in Atlanta and pretty much just to get out of there. Because right now they want to avoid cities as possible. But unfortunately finding a boat where practically in town is practically already taken. Finding the task to be more difficult than at first as they walk through the streets, and Lee pretty much is hanging on to the walkie-talkie as Ellie insisted that she wants it back, but of course Lee doesn't want to trust Ellie with it for the meantime, as the group got attacked by a group of walkers after a seemingly a bat seems to woken up the living dead, and the group has forcibly had to defend themselves from these walkers, as there is a scene where Bandit left Ellie, but unlike Clementine, and because that Ellie is slightly more older and more willing to act evilly if it's there or not, as she pretty much managed to fight off, but luckily. But unfortunately, Ellie is still a little girl that she could easily be overpowered by the walkers. But luckily, a really strange homeless man that was with the group after they used his home and decided to tag along, and he's deciding to keep the group long enough as he is going to distract the walkers, leaving them an opportunity, and Ellie won't forget about this homeless man. And she just wishes that didn't forget about his name. And the group managed to get to the house just like in canon. And I want to say, as Kenny has not is slightly changed because he still has his son, meaning Kenny is prone to act less self-destruct. As Kenny has something to fight for, which is that as Kenny is desperately trying to get the group to stay together, as Kenny is more willing to help the group as they once they manage to enter in, and Kenny finding out that there's a little kid about Dox's age, as this becomes apparent that Kenny had imagined that kid to be Doc and would have a terrifying imagination if he wasn't there for Doc. He could have lost his whole family, but luckily didn't because of it, as Kenny, even depending on the choice, if he is the one to put down his wife or you, as Kenny will actively tries to silently put them in his resting place with his dog. But unfortunately, it played out pretty similar where a stranger was watching Lee burying someone and leaving Kenny and Lee to find some sort of boat. As Kenny being much more calm-headed, as once Lee and Kenny meets Molly, and Kenny avoids from getting his butt handed to him, as Kenny is being a much more calm individual, as unfortunately just like Clementine, who's been following the both of the adults, as Ellie was also followed, leaving Molly to pretty much confirm that these two men aren't with the group that's been terrorizing the town, as just like in canon, as Walkers pretty much separates Elliot with the rest, leaving Lee to go through the sewers and accidentally meet a whole communion, and after persuading and lucky enough to get a doctor to check on one of their friends who seemingly is injured. Not to mention, as Kenny is pretty much avoiding drinking because he didn't feel like being depressed because he still has his son and pretty much being much more active because of their missing mother. But unfortunately, Ellie seems to be missing, and after looking around, as Ellie seemingly finding a boat, as this gets Kenny to actually have some hope that secretly that that's been dying, and after a few more hours late into night, as Kenny reveals that the boat is good, it just needed a battery and a fuel. As they begin to make a plan to go to the harbor where the violent group has been pretty much have been hoarding supplies, and their job is to sneak in and hopefully steal some. And ultimately, this is where your choice matters, if because compared to Ellie to Clementine, as Ellie actively really wants to help, wants to come along, but ultimately it's up to your choice depending on which Ellie will feel very differently. Cha- if you try to make say trying to protect Naomi here, as Ellie is beginning to feel like that she isn't important in the group, but technically does stay after looking at Lee very seriously. And if you chose to let Ellie come along, she would be quite grateful. And once the group have Depending if you let Ellie come along, in fact that she might even persuade Doug to come along. And of course Kenny refuses this because he doesn't want his boy to be in any danger. But Ellie pretty much bit back that you are so afraid to let your son to die that you're not even letting him try to even live. Because the fact that you always try to comfort him, well, guess what that got him? He was so afraid when he lost his mother, and you did nothing about it but drain your sadness away, leaving me to comfort my best friend while you worry about yourself. And this is when Ken is feeling a bit disrespectful that Ellie pretty much yell at him for being a bad father. But even though Ellie is kinda acting like a little brat, but unfortunately she is right that Kenny is being a terrible father for his son. As Kenny looks to his son, realizing that if he doesn't let Doc become a man in this new world, that because they took it from their mother, realizing that he needs to act dark, not a kid anymore, but more of a survivor. As Kenny will pretty much teach Doc how to become a survivor, just in case something happens to him. That Doc is pretty doesn't want that, but also can't, but can ignore the fact that could actually happen. But Gary just simply passes son by the back. It should be fun because he has Ellie by his side, who seems to be a very good friend of him. And that's when Doc realizes that he's not truly alone after losing his mother. As the group begins to go towards the territory with Ellie and Doc alongside them, arrive to the the hidden location where the banner simply is hoarding supplies, but finding out that most of the people are practically dead and pretty much all of them are walkers, leaving them the opportunity to avoid any gunshot, which means that nothing really changed apart from where Ellie pretty much saved Leaf from a walker that was a close call, but ultimately nothing really changes much. As they continue to perhaps get away, as ultimately Ben pretty much spills the bean, and pretty much nothing really changed as Kenny goes ballistic and pretty much tries to kill Ben, but nothing much really changed much. As once they got out of there, as it really began to dawn on Ellie that they're not really going to go after her parents and pretty much cry in a corner, as Lee not wanting to leave her by herself is beginning to sit on the couch as he just tries to get some sleep. But just like in the original, as Ellie simply disappears and notice that there's a walkie outside, and just like in the original, there's no way for Lee to avoid it and simply gets bitten from it. After Lee has a revelation that this mysterious guy managed to capture Ellie, just like the original, as Lee will be determined to save Ellie, and everything goes pretty similar as Lee gets all his friends to help him, but unfortunately they are cornered in walkers. But this does leave Lee to go live unconscious, and ultimately the choice to cut his arm off or keep it the way it is, as they simply are beginning to leave the area and pretty much say everything has stayed the same. But as they return back to the house where the boat is, as it's revealed the people that they have pretty much stole the boat, leaving the group having no plan of pretty much escaping, leaving Kenny especially quite angry, and it's revealed that he's about to pretty much blame it at all on Ben if Ben is still alive at this point. But everything to the point where they manage to get up the the upstairs and realizing that the house is connected to another house and manage to get out of there. As but unfortunately, depending on the choice, as Lee pretty much lost the radio if Ben isn't here. But if Ben is there, as Ben would, but we're going to change things. The reason why, if you don't have Ben alive to a certain point, as Kenny will pretty much sacrifice himself just to get the radio. And I'm going to change it so if Ben isn't with you, as Lee didn't drop the radio, which means that scene pretty much never happens. But if you do have Ben still alive at this point, as Kenny will pretty much try to correct the wrong, but unfortunately, as Lee and Kenny really tried to save her, but realizing that they really couldn't save Ben, as Kenny had to make a quick decision, as Kenny says how sorry he is for Ben, but he needs to watch out for his family, and the only way for Ben to not have an a gruesome death, as Kenny quickly is left for a moment to end Ben's death for him so that he doesn't get eaten alive by the walkers, as Doc is quite shocked at what his father did, but Kenny isn't proud of Ben. And this is where you get the choice of not killing Caution will give him a feeling that even though it's wrong, it's the right choice. Or if Kenny is the one did it, leaving Kenny, he should have done that with his Caution before, as Kenny is pretty much with the group, as unfortunately as they did try to cross over, as realizing Lee almost fell unconscious, depending if he didn't cut his arm off or not, revealing that Lee doesn't have much time, and beginning to yell at them he's going to get Clementine alone, and pretty much yell at them where they could meet again, leaving Kenny to actually be quite against this, as Lee begins an argument, and ultimately as Lee gets start to see if this is a suicide mission, I'm not willing to put your son address just for my sake, realizing that Lee is correct, as Kenny is hesitant to do so, depending how your relationship is with him. If it's bad, then Kenny is more likely more willing to leave Lee, leaving Lee to pretty much save Ellie. Nothing really changed much when Lee pretty much walks through a herd of walkers, and pretty much that moment pretty much kept the same, as Lee becomes a complete awesomeness by pretty much getting through the walkers with nothing but blades. And if you have Lee's other hand and just grabs a knife and beginning to slaughter the walkers and manage to reach his destination, the conversation between him and the stranger would stay the same, but the difference is as Ellie would be more aggressive trying to get out, but unfortunately the stranger did something to Ellie to the point where the hot-headed girl is simply unusual calm, to the point where Ellie is beginning to unsure if anyone is really going to save her, as this gets Lee a bit more angry on what he did to her, as the stranger, all he ever did is told things to Ellie about Lee, depending on your choice, and if you're already honest with Ellie, as Ellie wouldn't be faced by, but ultimately she is more upset that Lee didn't try to save her parents, because he knows that Ellie's parents didn't make it. But if you choose to pretty much hide anything from Ellie, as Ellie will pretty much deny about Lee. But ultimately nothing really changes, as Ellie, being more braver than Clementine, is more willing to attack the stranger, giving that chance, and clearly giving Lee enough at the moment to pretty much stop the stranger and pretty much end him. And ultimately they had the idea on covering themselves in walker blood and managed to pretty much walk through. And everything stays the same to the point where Ellie looks realizes that the walkers that she just met is her parents, leaving her to be stunned, and to the point where Lee pretty much fell unconscious, and Ellie pretty much saves him, and everything pretty much stayed the same, including the saddest part when it's revealed that that Lee is bitten, as Ellie pretty much denies this, as Lee teaches her the last time, and ultimately it's Ellie's choice to shoot Leo or to let him turn, leaving Ellie to not show where she is once she leaves. But she does look upon a far distance with four figures, and they simply notice her, leaving Ellie to not show what's her fate. Once Joel and Clementine manage to escape the snow area, and not to mention the people that pretty much hunt them down, but leaving Clementine to be much more quiet than usual, as her normal charges manage to get Joel a bit more spiritually, but he noticed that Clementine is unusually quiet, to the point where Joel is giving effort trying to get Clementine to say something or try to encourage her, but ultimately she just stayed quiet. But until Clementine sees something that she might have never seen, as she just saw a giraffe, leaving Joel a bit shocked that Clementine just ran, but realizing what she saw and kind of understanding and taking a moment just to enjoy the scenery of giraffes walking in a very apocalyptic city, but yet also quite beautiful, as this does get Clementine to be out of her funkness and pretty much back to her normal self. As Joel is beginning to reveal his past to Clementine, and Clementine is quite thankful that Joel is putting himself out there revealing about him, while also Clementine now pushing any further that might be a bit too much for Joel to handle, as Clementine would understand and knowing that herself, but unfortunately in a very scary accident where Clementine and Joel reach deeper in the city, pretty much closer, but one scary accident as Clementine is almost down, but luckily as Joel is attempting to save her until two men try to stop him trying to revive Clementine, but quickly got knocked up as Joel wakes up, revealing that in the firefighting space, as Joel realizes they are at the, and not to mention revealing that Maylin is next to him and informing him he did very well to get Clementine all the way here safely, and wanting to see Clementine as Marlin stops him. As just like in the game, as Marlin could see that Joel really cares for Clementine, and Marlin attempted to making Joel not wanting to worry about her, as to the point where Marlin has to send a firefly and get Joel in handcuffs just to escort him out, and he will receive the gunship like she promised. But ultimately, as Joel realizes that he's about to lose someone important yet again, as Joel pretty much watches it in a first state and pretty much kills everyone, no witnesses alive, as he pretty much begins to kill everyone as he managed to retrieve Clementine, as it's revealed to when he heard that Marlene that they order to get the cure from Clementine, they need to pretty much kill her for it, and Joel isn't about to let that happen as he carries Clementine out, as he ultimately kills Marlene, as Joel has ultimately accepted this path, as Joel pretty much puts Clementine in a car and pretty much gets away scot-free. And once Clementine wakes up that the last time she saw a fireflies putting her in a sleep, and is quite surprised what just happened, and reveal that to Joel what happened, as they realize there are more immunities just like her, and they could have better research than them rather than her, leaving Clementine to be very suspicious, as in the original, as Ellie is quite confused but ultimately trusts Joel because she doesn't want to be alone. But Clementine isn't that easy to not always believe what Joel says, and quite very curious what happened to the hospital, to the point where at the very end of the game it's revealed that Clementine is quite weird how Joel is acting, and that pretty much drives her as Clementine pretty much threatens Joel that she might leave and never return if he doesn't tell the truth. If he doesn't, he will never see her ever again, leaving Joel in a difficult situation and beginning to reveal everything just like in part 2, but this time is much more apparent this year, revealing that he killed all the fireflies because the only way to get the cure is if they kill her. We're getting Clementine to be quite shocked, and I'm not sure how to process that Joel is willing to kill everyone just so that she gets to live, and is quite confused and doesn't know how to feel about it, as if she begins to tear up and just pretty much just walks, not trying to run but just walks, leaving Joel to follow her as they pretty much return back where Tommy's used to be living, though I'm not sure how their relationship continues. And that's where we're gonna end the episode there. I hope you guys enjoy this series until season 2, I believe. That will be quite for some time now. Until then, see you there. Keep it peace.